The NFL Players Association team report cards came out last week, which spurred this guest booking. Joining us here from the NFLPA, the Chief Strategy Officer, J.C. Tretter, here on the Rich Eisen Show. Good to see you, J.C. How are you?
Good seeing you. I'm doing well. How about yourself?
So I imagine one of your chief pieces of strategy, J.C., was to have running backs get paid $20 million a year. So check that box. Congratulations.
Knocking it out of the park. So far, so good.
I imagine that makes you very happy, what you heard about from Philadelphia, correct?
Absolutely. I think you were hitting it right where people talk about that running backs are replaceable. I don't think anybody, after watching what Saquon did last year, would say he's replaceable. And I think that's the point the running backs have been making for a long time, is that there are difference makers at the positions that you can't just plug and play somebody else. And I think everybody's excited to see Saquon, deservingly so, get rewarded for that.
Yeah, and I guess, like, how do you handle this? How does the union handle this subject matter? For instance, you know, we just mentioned how very talented the running back group looked like in Indianapolis. They will be future union members come, you know, late April, right, officially, when they're drafted. So they would be the ones replacing these guys. I understand that. It's just paying the guys, getting these guys paid in a manner commensurate to their value that they show on the field. How does the union handle that conundrum, JC?
Well, I think this is a big first step, right? Is having somebody reset the market. It's something we hadn't seen for a while, where usually you see a bunch of players take a step up to the top of the market, and then somebody eventually comes and breaks the glass ceiling above it, and that starts that stretch of then pushing up that entire market. So I think this is the beginning of that trend, hopefully. But again, a huge, well-deserved payday for Saquon for everything he's done in Philadelphia this year.
Right, and doing it early is one of the ways that you can do that. That's, you know, a tool, if you will, in a general manager's toolkit and building a roster. So is the franchise tag. What's your opinion of the franchise tag, JC?
Yeah, I think player movement, you always want. Guys want to be able to get to free agency and get fair market value, but it's something we have in the CBA right now. And I think that was when the running backs a year or two ago were getting frustrated with a lot of them got tagged. That's a tool management has right now in the CBA. It's been in there for a long, long time. I think anytime we can try to get players any position. Again, it's not just a running back issue. The franchise tags affects all positions. But the more we can get players to the open market to be able to be bid on and to be bid up will help the entire market rise as well. That's how the free economics of our business work.
Yeah, sure. And then just before we get to the report cards, because I'm curious as to how this all comes about. How have you found a difference in the rookie class now that players can get paid in college, JC? Have you noticed a difference of how a rookie comes into the National Football League and expects to be paid, or maybe shows up to work in a manner that is entitled? I mean, because that is a conversation I heard at the Combine quite a bit, JC.
I think the NIL market is still ever shifting and ever evolving, and it's something everybody's trying to get their arms wrapped around and understand where this game's going. I think there are some positives to it. You could argue there are some drawbacks to it. I think the players bouncing around, the development of them physically is impacted by that. But also I think guys understanding that this is a business from a young age, or a younger age, is better. Usually that happened once you became pro. I always said, like, you start off as a little leaguer and your dad's coaching you, and then you go to high school and it's your geometry teacher or your geography teacher who's coaching you, and you view them as kind of friends who are looking out for you, or loved ones. Mm-hmm. And then you go to college and it's the coach that sits on your couch and says, hey, I'm going to treat, talks to your mom and says, I'm going to treat him like a son of mine. It was always kind of looked at. And then once you got to the league, you realized this was a business and everybody was out to use this as their job and their profession. And I think now the players at a younger age in college understanding that might be beneficial to their careers and the union in general going forward. So I think there's positives and negatives, but it's ever shifting. It's a landscape that I think 3 months from now we'll have a different conversation about too.
What would your NIL deal have been in Cornell, JC, back in the day?
I think I probably would have got like buy one bagel at Cornell Bagel and get one free would probably be the most they would have offered me, and that might have been pushing it.
I thought you would go poor man's pizza at the hot truck behind the U-Haul, JC.
Wings over Ithaca. They might have given me like buy six, get one free wings over Ithaca. I think that's probably the size of my talent or my worth to the Cornell Big Red football team at the time.
Is the hot truck still there? Because I gained about 20 pounds one summer at Cornell Summer College eating the poor man's pizza at the hot truck behind the U-Haul.
I think Louis' lunch truck closed down, but I think maybe the hot truck's still there. But
yeah, it wasn't good for me. It wasn't good for me whatsoever. But going from Cornell to the National Football League and now with the Players Association, J.C. Tretter here on the Rich Eisen Show. What does the Chief Strategy Officer do? What is your title? What do you do with the PA? JC?
Yeah, a lot of it's continuing the initiatives I've been working on as president, the report cards, some of the other issues, and then we'll also be building out a data analytics function at the PA. So using data to drive a lot of our decisions. Instead of using anecdotes or, hey, I heard this from a couple of guys, or this is what we think is happening. I think we have to have a better grasp of what actually is happening based off data. And that will help us both educate our membership, but also make more informed decisions around the CBA or free agency or anything that involves players and what they care about.
So the data, like what sort of data are you referring to?
Yeah, so we have contract data and getting a better grasp of where markets are going. I think that helps educate both the agents, but also the players. And I think that's something we can do. We can educate both of them and just help them be a resource for them. I think when it comes to some health and safety data, I think the more access to data we get, the better. That's something our executive director, Lloyd Howe, brought up in his State of the Union address at the Super Bowl, was getting more access to that data. Some of it we get I would say you would say access to, but it's de-identified data. So they put a graph up there and say, here's the data, but you don't know what the axes are and you don't know what the points are. It just looks like something my kids would draw up for me and I'd hang up behind me. So I think the more access to data we get, the more we can dive into some of these issues around health and safety, around compensation, around revenue. That will then get us in a better position to advocate for our players.
So tell me about the data behind the team report cards here, because we saw the grades. A lot of people saw the grades, and that's a lot of grist for Mills for sure, which we'll dive into a little bit. But what is the data gathering, JC?
Yeah, so this is the third year that we've done this. This year we had 1,695 players respond with full report card or full surveys. That's 77% of our membership ended up responding. And it gives us a really good look into each player's team and how they interact with their facility on a day-to-day basis. And again, this isn't about wins and losses. As you can tell, there's nothing connecting teams that win versus teams that not. It's not like the teams that win are on the top, but that's somewhat the point, right? Like we want to know how the players feel or are treated on a day-to-day basis in their facilities. And we've broken it out into several categories, really basing it off how players interact with their building. You come in, you grab your breakfast, you go to the locker room, then you go get treatment in the training room, you work out in the weight room, all the different areas you interact with and the staffs that staff those areas. We want to know how they're doing. And the good news is after year 3, we're seeing major improvements across the league. And I don't think we can claim that they're because of the report cards. I think it matches up timeline wise, but in the end, what our job is, or what our goal is as a union, is to see ever rising standards in the league, which what we are seeing. We're seeing teams make major improvements. You look at a team like the Washington Commanders, who had been 32nd overall the first 2 years, now jump up to 11th. And all that was done wasn't knocking down the facility and putting $50 million in. They reinvested in the food program. They added some things for the families. They changed how they travel. They brought in a new head coach. Like all of these things made giant changes, which shot them up the overall rankings, which again is great for our guys that we can see such improvements in just a single year.
Yeah, there was also another change there you didn't mention, JC, that might have, meant something or two or a million different ways, You didn't mention the ownership changing.
I think Josh Harris said, one of my favorite quotes, I'm not an F- guy, he said after year 2. And he lived up to that. He is definitely not an F- guy. I think his players felt that.
Mm-hmm.
And he responded and made so many things better around that building. And just going there for our team visits, you could feel the energy just different from previous years. A lot of credit goes to Josh. A lot of credit goes to Dan Quinn and his staff and the players there too for having such an amazing year. But again, that's the goal of these report cards, is to make sure players have a look into what's going on at other buildings and make sure they understand what their standards are, how their team's treating them versus other teams. So it's been a really valuable tool for us for 3 years now.
Yeah, I mean, in terms of correlating grades to winning on the field, you said that those are not really correlated. The Super Bowl champs got an F in team travel, and I guess I know Josh, Harris said he's not an F minus guy. He got an F for the locker room. Patriots getting an F for team travel. I mean, part of that is, from what we heard, no Wi-Fi and ashtrays on an antiquated aircraft. JC, is your intention to, for lack of a better phrase, embarrass the franchise into fixing that sort of stuff, or what? Or do you actually talk to the Patriots about this sort of thing in advance of the cards coming out?
Yeah, it's not a public shaming. I think what we'd like to see is what Josh took it as, is shining a light on the issues that the players are experiencing, and then the ownership group or the coaches or the staffs then can figure out ways to improve those areas. And that's what we saw with the Commanders. We saw that for a team like the Falcons too, who made large jumps. In the end, it is a very hard thing when you're a player and you have an issue going on at the facility or something doesn't feel right. It is a big ask to say, walk up to ownership and tell them what they're doing is not good enough. And if that's the expectation, I think you probably don't get a lot of feedback from ownership or for ownership. If that's the expectation, is that you're going to have a player who goes up to their head boss and says, hey, you're not living up to your end of the bargain. So I think what this is really giving candid feedback, and pointing out to areas where they can make huge differences. And again, we're not talking about, to Josh Harris's. Josh didn't have to knock down that facility to make giant improvements. Instead, Josh picked a lot of you would say the softer skills, the softer issues around the staffing, around the food, around the travel, and it made a giant difference for his team and how they interacted with the facility or how they felt taken care of. And that too is the goal.
Do you hear from Woody Johnson after the Jets give him an F, the only ownership grade with that letter?
I've not heard from Woody. These are things too that we would love to have that type of dialogue with teams, both from a high level head coach, ownership side, but also from the individual staff levels too, where what this has proven over 3 years is the staffs at these teams want to do good work. They want to help out the guys. They want to give a good work environment for the players. And sometimes they have questions on how we can do that better. What are guys looking for? How can I do my job better? They want to ask those questions. There are some things we're not allowed to talk to individual teams about without the league being involved, and that causes some issues. But that's something we would love to be a resource in those discussions to these teams, because in the end, we all should be wanting the same thing, right? Like we want the players to be taken care of, because healthier, more taken care of players will then perform better on the field, which is better for all of us when the product's better, because that means everybody's bringing in more money. Like there's all things that we should be working together on to make these improvements. But that's a struggle now, is how we can do that and how we can have those conversations with the teams.
Yeah, locker room, training staff, weight room, strength coaches, team travel, head coach, ownership. Those are the 8 categories in which you asked your membership to vote on. Based, I can tell, only 3 teams had an A in every single category, whether it's the actual letter minus or plus. Vikings, Dolphins, and Raiders. Does this affect free agency destinations, do you think? Do players use this as a resource when they're going about their business about where to go? JC?
I think it's probably, there's a lot of factors in free agency, right? Like it's not like you have depending on who you were. For myself, it's not like I had 32 teams asking me to come play for them when I was playing. So you already have a limitation. And then it comes down to what your offer is, what you're looking for, there's a ton of variables. I think the most valuable part of these has been peeling back the curtain on the player experience. So I remember my first year, I was talking to a player and I was like, hey, it doesn't look like your team travel is really up to standard across the league. And they're like, what do you mean by that? And I was like, you guys have roommates on the road. And he was like, other players get to have their own room? And I was like, yeah, most other teams give you your own room. And I was like, also, you guys don't get to sit first class. The coaches sit first class. And he was like, wait, other teams let their players sit first class? And you never really got that information before these scorecards went out. The only way you would learn that was if you signed a free agent or you traded for somebody who came from a team that was doing things differently. Would that word start to spread? So I think the really valuable part of this is allowing everybody at their teams to see at what standard they're being treated or where they fall. Hey, if we're one of 3 teams that aren't offering this, that kind of says something about your team, that most of the other teams are willing to offer that to its players other than them. So I think really peeling back the curtain and giving them access to the information is the valuable part.
All right, in the few minutes I have left with you, JC Tretter, NFLPA Chief Strategy Officer, I want to talk with you about quarterback player development, because I think this league's got a problem with it, with this subject matter. There's too many quarterbacks, second, third stringers, that when they get out there are not nearly as up to speed or have the experience necessary to help a team win or bridge a gap between weeks that quarterbacks are hurt. We're seeing it more and more and more. And listen, I know when I first started with NFL Network 22 years ago, there were a bunch of teams that said these voluntary workouts are really mandatory, and you as a union needed to do something about it, and I think you have. But it just seems that there's less and less time that guys can be in the building. There's less and less time in which guys can be in a playbook. There's less and less time in which practices and reps can be given to backups that might need to be called upon. And I'm wondering what you think of this subject matter as a union, because the last thing you want is a union member to go out there unready, because that's the way a career can get destroyed, JC.
Yeah, and not to turn this around on you and interview you, but I got actually a question on that too.
Let's have a chat.
Like, sure. I feel like more so than ever, the top of the market, or like the top quarterbacks, there's more of them than ever before, where we're seeing more really competent, quality quarterback play from the starters. I get your question about the backups, but I feel like that also has always been somewhat an issue. Like, the quarterback position is the toughest position in sports.
Agreed.
It's not easy. It is both from a mental and physical standpoint. Being that highly skilled and capable is very hard. So I would love to, I would want to dive more into and look back and see where we're trending. I feel like that's always been an issue too, where the old saying, if you got 2 quarterbacks, you got none. Like, you're never really expecting the backup to be on the same level as your star, especially if you have a really good one. So there's always going to be a little bit of a knock. But there's a bunch of different ways to look at player development overall. I think there's a level of football readiness that always plays in a factor of getting ready for the season. There's a physical level of readiness that plays into it. And I think there are some things we should look at overall when it comes to the offseason and training camp, is how do we thread the needle of doing both? How do we make the offseason valuable and training camp valuable to get players to develop and become better players, but also be more physically ready? We've continued to work on injury rates and work on number of soft tissue injuries. I think there's still more work to be done there. So I think we need to look at more of a full package or full picture of what we can do to make sure the product we're putting on the field is a high level as we can. And that is preparing players to be ready to go out there, but also making sure that the truly generational talents don't unnecessarily get hurt. And that comes with preparedness too. So I think it's a 2-pronged issue to make sure we've got the best product on the field.
No, listen, I'm still scratching my head over why, well, I'm sure it was money, why NFL Europe got shuttered, JC. I speak to a bunch of people. I work with Kurt Warner, who says his time in the Arena League and the NFL Europe got him ready for his Magic Carpet Ride 99 season, and it was with Kurt, just as an example, a couple of years ago, I'm in a meeting, a pre-broadcast meeting in London with Mike Vrabel with the Titans, and I asked him how Will Levis is doing. He shrugged his shoulders. He goes, I don't know. I mean, we can't get him reps during the week, and he hardly got to play in the preseason. And so I have no idea. And he was one Ryan Tannehill moment away from having to play Will Levis and win games with a roster full of veterans that were depending on the quarterback spot. So it just seems that the way things are set up right now, it is not a successful plan in place right now for crucial moments to be met by, as you said, the most difficult position to evaluate and develop. JC.
Yeah, no, I'm with you again. I think we need to look at how we can improve that overall. And I think that's another thing we all should be aligned on, right? Like we want to make sure our players are getting better. Our players should want to get better. And then, the better product we put out there brings in more money to those players who are performing. So I think it's something we all should be aligned on. I think there are a couple different ways we can work on solving that. But all that plays into the sides coming together and figuring it out.
JC, I appreciate the time. Let's do this more often. I'm happy to chop up these subject matters with you, and I appreciate giving us these grades and stuff to talk about while we're waiting for free agency to hit and all that other stuff. I appreciate the time, and let's do this again soon.
Absolutely. That'd be great. Thanks for having me.
You bet. That's JC Tretter, NFLPA Chief Strategy Officer, joining us on the day that the running back market gets reset. $20 million per for Saquon Barkley. Catch the Rich Eisen Show live weekdays from 12 to 3 p.m. Eastern on Roku Sports Channel in the U.S.